Myles Garrett has requested a trade, and there's a big piece that not a lot of people are talking about, which we'll discuss next on the Unbearable Sports Podcast.
We're going to take the North and never give it back.
So that's a good pick. You get the corner. I got to go bold, right? I got to go bold for this.
Yeah, she's got some nice.
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're out there on YouTube, and also rate 5 stars everywhere that you get your podcast. What's going on, everybody? I know. We were going to do Senior Bowl today. I have a lot of the graphics already done and already set up, but this whole Myles Garrett situation I wanted to talk about today and break down because, like I teased, there is a key piece that not a lot of people are talking about, which makes me feel like this might not happen. So that's why I want us to break it all down. But if you're out there on YouTube, let me know down below. Are you up for trading for Myles Garrett? Because today, on Monday, he formally requested a trade away from the Cleveland Browns. But we had a lot to go to, so I want to go through the quick little stories first, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of this show. So let's get right into it. Official hires. So yesterday, we broke down some of the potential coaches that the Bears were going to sign, how we said that we were going to sign Dan Roshar, and now he's officially our offensive line coach. So as of today, Jordan Schultz saying that, hey, there's an agreement between the Bears and him for him to become the offensive line coach for the Chicago Bears. Like we said, we were expecting this to happen, but looks like it officially happened today. So want to just kind of keep on moving on because we already broke this down. Lots and lots of experience as an offensive line coach. The biggest, him coming from the whole Sean Payton system with him with the New Orleans Saints and being the run game coordinator over there. So one thing to look out for, maybe he does become the run game coordinator, just something for us to look at. But now, next, I want to talk about Ian Cunningham. I always like to kind of keep y'all updated on the Ian Cunningham saga. Probably last week, there's a lot of talk, a lot of random rumors out there from people on Twitter saying, hey, he is now going to the Jaguars. Jaguars have now hired a couple key pieces, but the spot that is still open is GM. And today, Albert Breer reporting that the Jaguars have officially requested to interview Bears assistant GM Ian Cunningham. So, he hasn't even interviewed yet, but it does, maybe he might be that missing cog that they need inside of the Jaguars situation, something that we'll continue to monitor. Just as a friendly reminder, if he gets hired, we get 2 third-round picks, which could help with Myles Garrett, which I realized inside of the left-hand panel misspelled his name. So, hey, you know what? It's all good. Then the only other piece that I want to just bring up is that Jim Arthur, the head strength and conditioning coach for the Bears, was let go. The Bears have parted ways with him. So it looks like Ben Johnson is going to be bringing in his own strength coach. Now, the reason why I want to bring that up is because ever since they got him, it felt like the Bears, we haven't been as injured as some of the other teams out there. And also with Matt Nagy, I remember how injured it always felt like we were. We had so many people on IR, and I like this. I like the strength coach, but now he's gone. So unfortunately, we'll see what the Ben Johnson and everybody decides to bring in. Now, the moment everybody's been waiting for, let's talk about Cooper Kupp and Myles Garrett at requesting trades today. Cooper Kupp just very, very recently just announced that he is requesting a trade away from the St. Louis Rams. And I feel like a lot of us feel like Cooper Kupp is younger than he actually is. He's 31 years old, which is the same age as Keenan Allen when we traded for him, or, just about the same age. And quite frankly, he's just been a slot player playing around usually over 60% of his snaps from that slot position. But also, as many fantasy owners know, he's also struggled with some health and just staying on the field. Now, ever since his amazing season that he had back in 2021, where he had 178 receptions and 2,000 yards, just absolute insanity when it comes. I believe that these grades are playoffs and regular season. That's why it's so huge. But he just had absolute crazy seasons of production, and now hasn't broken 1,000 yards over the past 3 seasons. So this player that we all kind of expect, when you actually look at his seasons, he just really had that one incredible season. I see this as kind of like almost like a downgrade from Keenan Allen just because of it. But also, too, key thing we need to also look at is the salary cap. And when you look at what Adam Schefter reported, saying now that the Rams have said they will look to trade Cooper Kupp, here is the cost. If Kupp is traded, his new team would inherit his $20 million salary in 2025, $7.5 million roster bonus plus 12.5 base, and 19.85 in 2026 unless renegotiated. So you're talking about basically a 2-year, $20 million a year deal if you were to trade for Cooper Kupp. So, Bears fans, would we want to do that? For me, no. We need speed. We know that we want speed. And yeah, we had Keenan Allen here. If we wanted someone, we could always just re-sign Keenan Allen if we want a veteran slot player. But with this, I wouldn't touch Cooper Kupp with a 10-foot pole right now. So to me, Cooper, off the table. So now let's get into Myles Garrett. So Myles Garrett, this is the big kahuna that everyone's talking about. Requested trade from the Cleveland Browns. And this guy is only 29 years old, so he's getting up there, but still defensive ends usually have a longer shelf life than other players in the NFL. They can go out there until 34, 35 years old. But still, he's kind of getting into that second half. We've seen this also with Khalil Mack, where Khalil Mack is still a very productive pass rusher. Myles Garrett, though, you look at his previous seasons, 92.3 defensive grade, 93.9 the year before, 92.5, 92 the year before that. This guy has been elite. And I saw this too. PFF has his pass rush win rate since like 2022. It's close to 25%. You don't even see that at the college level. Myles Garrett has been absolutely just an absolute stud at this defense. So would you trade for him? Because this opens up the whole, what would you actually trade for Myles Garrett? Because that's the first question that comes up, right? Myles Garrett wants to be traded. So people immediately go to, well, what can we trade for him? I saw some people out there, Matt Miller, saying the Bears should trade their first and their 2 seconds this year for Myles Garrett. Do you do that? I think that that's a little bit, I don't know, he's a phenomenal player, but it just feels weird mortgaging kind of this draft. But also, too, I think that that's not really a legitimate hypothetical. Everything that's being reported says that, hey, the Cleveland Browns will most likely want to get at least a number 1 next season. Similar to the whole Khalil Mack trade, where the Bears, because that's the closest thing to this. But back then, Khalil Mack was only 26 years old. While with this, you have Garrett at 29. It's crazy to say because Khalil Mack was basically coming off of a defensive MVP or like 2 years from a defensive MVP. Myles Garrett is better than what Khalil Mack is. That's just how incredible Myles Garrett is as a defensive player. I think when you look at it, you're looking at least 2 first-rounders. So would you do that? That's the realistic take with this. It's at least 2 first-rounders, basically what you had with the whole Khalil Mack trade. Now, would you do it? I'll talk about what I would do later on. Because even though we have all this speculation of who should trade for him, who should get him, right? The Bears, they want to make a splash. And if you get that person opposite Montez Sweat, man, the thing that I love about this is that Garrett would be the face of the defense. We talked about this. We don't have any Batmans, really. Like Jalen Johnson is a phenomenal corner, but for, a lot of corners aren't necessarily the poster boy, right? The Jalen Ramseys, yeah. But right now, think about it. What team is Jalen Ramsey right now? Some of you probably got it, but some of you don't. So let's talk a little bit more about Myles Garrett, because this is the news. This is the piece. This is the key thing that I feel like maybe it's not going to happen. It always can happen because, the Browns could say, you know what, we're going to find something. Maybe there's some loopholes, but I want us to look at the cap numbers. And the people that know the cap the best are Spot Rack and Over the Cap. So I have information from both of the people that created it to tell you that this is good. If they do this, this would be a very, very bad thing for Cleveland. So if Spot Rack reported or tweeted this out, that if they trade Myles Garrett, the new team would acquire $19.8 million of salary cap space, which is actually phenomenal for a player of his caliber. And then in 2026, they would have $25 million, all not guaranteed, because after you trade someone, all that money is not guaranteed, right? So all the players that we've traded for, like before we re-signed DJ Moore, you could literally trade them for nothing. Or you look at Ryan Bates. Ryan Bates, you can cut, and there's no guarantees. There's no penalties for getting rid of him because we traded for him. All the guarantees, since they're guaranteed by that previous team, they stay with that previous team. So the Browns have constantly kicked the can down the road with paying Myles Garrett his guaranteed money. If they were to do this, his dead cap hit would be $36 million. And the Browns already have one of the worst cap situations because of the whole Deshaun Watson situation. So if they do this, the Cleveland Browns would have a terrible cap situation. Also, too, SpotRack reported the 29-year-old is probably looking for also a 4-year, $137 million contract because he's one of the best defensive ends. So now when you see this, would you want to do that with most likely needing to re-sign him to give him this crazy big payday? But also the other piece I want to bring up is Jason, the founder of overthecap.com, tweeted this out. And I'll read the entire tweet because I think it's fascinating. It adds to the whole piece with Myles Garrett being this giant cap hit. If they were to actually trade him, it's going to put them in a very bad situation cap-wise. So Jason says, just to run a quick scenario, but prior to adjustments, the Browns would need to restructure Watson and Ward to the fullest and cut Conklin to trade Garrett. Doing all of that would leave them with likely around $2 and $7 million in cap space, depending on where the cap winds up. So think about that. If they restructured Watson's deal, so that's already a bad deal, but they push it farther down into the future, and same thing with Denzel Ward, then they could possibly break it to $2 to $7 million. Jason also continues to say, this would leave them in a Saints-like situation, because yet again, you're pushing all that stuff out. So really, outside of those 3 moves, there is little they can do besides extending Newsome and then June 1-ing, which is you kind of put more cap space, you kind of cut people, save extra money, so all that money doesn't come off this year or 2025, it comes off 2026. So June 1st, some players, and then they can sign some rookies. And then Jason's saying too, doing the math on this better option is probably extending Garrett and coming up with a dollar figure that would make him happy to be part of the rebuild next year. So this is where there's also a lot of extra language. Jason and SpotRack, they are the 2 people that go into every single contract to figure out all the ins and outs. Because this isn't the NBA where when you get Luka Doncic being traded, there's no such thing as guarantees and like the cap penalties when you trade it. So it's important to keep in mind the numbers. It's important to see that if the Browns do this, they are going to have a terrible cap situation. So my whole piece is, do they do like an Aaron Rodgers, kind of like what Jason from Over the Cap is kind of proposing? Do you just say, hey, we get it. We'll just pay you a boatload of money just to make you happy, kind of do an Aaron Rodgers-esque situation to say, this is kind of like the buyout. And then after this, you can leave, right? Something like that. Because when you look at this, if they end up trading him, you are talking about them getting rid of Conklin, getting rid of all sorts of players. There's rumors that Bitonio doesn't want to be part of a rebuild. Otherwise, he's just going to retire. So there's so much that they would have to do in order to move Myles Garrett. Not saying it's impossible, but it's still just, it makes it more unlikely when you see the cap number. So I hope that makes sense. Hope I was able to describe that well, or Jason from Over the Cap was able to describe that well. So now when we talk about will it happen, like we said, I don't fully buy into it. But also keep in mind that even though that it's not technically trade season, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of trades. SpotRec agrees too. Names to look out for: Deebo Samuel, Sam Hubbard. I also bring up Trey Hendrickson from the Bengals, someone who's, I believe, going into a contract year and someone who has not been pleased with the Bengals. So look for Trey Hendrickson, someone who also was with the Saints with Dennis Allen. So that isn't someone I'm keeping an eye out for. if you're talking about getting a trade, also typically plays the opposite side from Montez Sweat. That could be an option. And then also you're talking about Tyreek Hill, Kyle Pitts is already being rumored, Derek Carr, DK Metcalf, George Pickens, and Kenyon Green. So you're talking about some people not so productive and also people that might be a little head casey, but still lots of trades to potentially bring everyone up to speed on because, man, it's the off season. So much to go through. Like I said, I wasn't even able to do the Senior Bowl stuff. So if you're looking forward to that, make sure to like and subscribe so you can actually see the Senior Bowl coverage of some of the risers to keep an eye out for, and also rate 5 stars everywhere that you get your podcast. And with that, Unbearable Sports Podcast, we are out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a bad chick.